Okay, hi sisters and brothers. We're back for a short little video. We're not picking up the study in Proverbs yet. I don't really have time to do a very long video. It's just going to be a short one. And I had picked up this verse. Of course, it's quoted in the New Testament differently than the way that it is quoted in the Old Testament. And so when you get the Old Testament rendering on it, once we know the allegorical or figurative context, then we're able to understand what that this particular verse is actually talking about. So we're going to begin in Hosea. Okay, so let me see if I can find the passage. I think that's the one right there. Okay, so this is Hosea. No, that's Isaiah. So it's the one before that. Hosea 13. This is a really good chapter. I believe this is the one that God speaks of Ephraim being the firstborn of her womb. I might be wrong on that. I didn't look at the full chapter, but I was looking at, I had started in 13, um, but it's verse 14 that we want to look at. That's quoted in the New Testament of Jesus who overcame the grave, right? Hell, death, and the grave. But in the Old Testament, it's rendered quite differently. And for those of us who understands the figurative now in the allegorical, we know that it's absolutely not talking about Jesus. It's not talking about an idol. It's not talking about a made up image of a bull god, Baal, Beelzebub, another name for your husband, bridegroom, the image standing in Daniel 2, that so many people wants to say, well, that's the Antichrist, and yet they've took thousands of years to build upon this idol, thousands of years. Well, now who have they built up for thousands of years? It's not an idol that's all of a sudden going to step on scene and you're not going to know who that idol is. It's the Antichrist, yes, but it's Jesus, which is why the world's going to be so readily deceived by this image. Few are going to be able to overcome the ditch, the snare that they laid, that Beelzebub, Satan, the accuser, Adam, who wants to be worshipped as Lord and God, and go against her law, right? And so here in Hosea 13, I'll begin at 13 just because this was a fascinating verse and I had spoken on it in another video. I don't know which channel I did that on. But it says this in Hosea 13:13, labor pains come upon him. No, this is the firstborn of mother's womb. We're talking about her this time, the daughter who represents the spirit of this covenant. But she is an unwise, it's got son, no daughter. And she was in the beginning because they have deceived. They have practiced to deceive her. When the time arrives, she fails to present herself at the opening of the womb. So we are talking about a birthing process here. But we are not talking about the birth of a son. We're talking about the birth of the firstborn in mother's womb called Ephraim, the daughter, representing the north kingdom. And we know that they divided the pleasant land. They divided it first female and male. And then it was female, female in a sense, because it's a harlot that exalts the male. I may have that reversed. I'm not thinking right on here because I'm looking at the next verse because we have looked at that. But knowing the truth that we know that we have presented ourselves. Truly, we have presented ourselves at the opening of the womb. And we don't present it to a male physician on the other side. We're present it to the midwife, which is female. In which in many cases was the mother. Many cases it was the mother that had to deliver the child of her daughter. And these were, I don't know, these were taught to their daughters, and daughters handed it down to their daughters, and so on and so on. It wasn't a physician. That came in the Inquisitions when they went out and murdered the wise women of the villages, that this was part of their responsibility to keep you healthy. And so we know that in the Inquisitions that they wanted to take full control so they could bring in their pharmaceutical companies, so they could bring in practicing male physicians and give all power unto that image so that you could easily be deceived by many of these male-oriented passages which were handwritten by the man, because we know that the little book sealed up is a tiny book of truth that is actually overwritten over the physical, which is the true spiritual that was there from the very beginning. And so we know that. That's what the little book sealed up in the angel's hand. And she's holding her birthright. That's what she's holding. That's why she's standing on land and sea in that particular passage in Revelation. And it's her. She's the seventh trumpet sounding. Trumpet simply means to warn the people. You're not coming out of the womb of Sheol believing in an idol. You're worshiping an idol called the Antichrist that we see every successive kingdom in the Old Testament, in Daniel 2. Every kingdom ruled by kings. God said, you didn't want me, you wanted your bloody kings. God also calls the kings heathens, also in a passage that I recently found, and I'm still looking for it again because I stumbled upon it late at night and I just was so tired I didn't bother to write it down. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to find it because it does so compare the kings of this world to heathens. And God says, you didn't want me, you wanted a king. And here at the end, they're calling God a king. And yet God says, you didn't want me, you wanted a king. And so they say that man upstairs. Of course, you want to know why we are, focusing on that. You should go watch the last video if you haven't already. And so we know it was all about man building man up, becoming very self-concentric and having himself worshipped as a god. And so that building began, we know, with Nebuchadnezzar, who became a beast. So this becomes our overlay, our spiritual overlay in understanding what's wrong with our world. Man has become a beast. He took her rights to write the law, which was found through the daughter of Zion, the branch of Mother Wisdom. She says, I laid the foundations. The only one we find laying the foundations is Mother, who has Mother Wisdom in Proverbs 8 or 9, I forget which chapter, where she says, I have hewn out my 7 pillars. She's the one that lays the foundation. Man doesn't. And God says, you married the daughter of a strange god. The strange god is Beelzebub, Satan, Adam, who is the father of all these men who wants to build their idol up. And you see this fake feeling in their hearts. You can see it. You can sense what the fakeness is. Because the reality is a true loving God would not subjugate women under man, forcing her to play his harlot. And when I say harlot, for those who are ignorant, and there's a lot of ignorant supposed Christians out there who supposedly knows the Bible, in the Old Testament, idolatry, harlotry, was considered idolatry. That's right. Idolatry led to harlotry and idolatry. In the beginning, God called harlotry idolatry, bowing down to an idol. And God says, you bow down to neither male nor female, but you receive the law from my daughter's tongue. I didn't tell you to go worship her. I don't tell you to make idols. I tell you to follow my path. Ask ye for the old paths and walk ye there in them. That's the old law system, the original law system that man rejected for a bloodshed law system and put in a religious lie that every king built upon from Nebuchadnezzar and straight on down, building up this male idol called the Antichrist. And for thousands of years, we see them building up religion and these male gods, Jesus being probably the central one, in my opinion, Allah, and then Yahweh. And we, of course, have male gods. We also have goddesses, but they're not worshipped to the degree, of course, that you get Jesus, the idol, in Daniel 2. And so you're not going to be able to reason out how this idol has been standing for thousands of years. This image of a male god that is worshipped for thousands of years, and say it ain't Jesus. It absolutely is Jesus. There's no other understanding of it. And the only way to have understanding of that, which is going to lead to the wisdom, because without understanding, you will have no wisdom. But with that understanding, before the understanding, you have to have willingness to want to understand. Without that willingness to want to understand, you are not going to have understanding, which is then going to lead you to wisdom. So you have to have the willing heart, obviously. And so I was left questioning last week whether understanding was a gift of God or whether it was something that we could acquire. And I have to conclude that it comes back to having a willing heart. Once you have the willing heart to open your eyes and listen with your ears and look around, take a good look around. Without that willingness, you are not going to have wisdom. You're not going to have understanding, rather. And it's through the understanding, because understanding is linked directly to wisdom. The two goes almost hand in hand in the Bible. Without understanding, you will have no wisdom. But that understanding comes by way of having a willing heart to listen and to hear and to look around. It does. So in Hosea 13:13, we just read it. And we speak of the opening of the womb by the firstborn daughter. It's not a son, Ephraim. Israel is the woman's seed. It's feminine for a reason. It's representing the daughters, which are the firstborn of mother's womb. Wisdom. And so when you're foolish, she doesn't present herself. She's not presenting herself, which kind of almost takes me back to a passage that we studied on Ruth Abbey towards the end of the channel when we came to the end. And I'm considering uploading some videos there again. I'm not certain why it just got, people seems to be more attached to that channel than Eighth Day. So I may go back to springing back and forth between the two channels. I don't know. I haven't fully decided yet. But anyway, towards the end of that channel, God asked the question, and we were looking at wisdom, and God says, what, can the womb hold thousands and thousands of children? Because I forget who was asking the questions. I don't know if it was Ezra and Wisdom as well asking the questions to the angel there. But the angel says, what? Can God's womb, or God is speaking there, says what? Can a woman's womb birth her whole, say you have a family of 15, can the woman birth 15 children all at once? And God says, so too my children. I can't birth you all at once because you're not born all at once, right? That's just sense and reason, God says in wisdom. So too with this child that presents herself at the opening of the womb, right? God says, I birth my children one at a time, is kind of the idea, much like a mother births her children one at a time. So in this case, it's her firstborn daughter, which is Israel, which is also called the servant of God in many passages. So she failed the first time to present herself, and we know why, because of the deception of the man who accused her. And we know it led to her defilement, her debasement, and being deceived by a man that she thought was her equal. We get her in is it Isaiah 50? Psalm 50, I think, where she says, we walk together, to the house of the Lord together. And then a man might know, you stabbed me in the back. And she could not get over the fact that he had stabbed her in the back. He had basically lied about her. And she did not see it coming. And it was the same with Eve in the garden. You could see that she was stunned by what Adam was accusing her of. She was absolutely stunned into silence, which is why we get in Isaiah 42. So this is an overview of male and female in the earth. God says, you're without excuse not to understand it. I manifested it for your eyes to bear witness to. My Godhead is male and female. It is not male. And it is the female who is the creator of all things. Now, you can deny that all you want. You're not going to deny it when you're standing before me going, hey, mother, I didn't know you existed. Which is why it takes us to Uriel going, how can I tell you of heavenly things if you don't even understand how your earthly things work? That was a good one. That was a good one. And it's funny how our brains are taught not to reason, not to understand, not to make sense. It's as if we've been deceived by an idol in man wanting to play God and be worshipped, and make woman his harlot and tell her he's her head. And oh, wait. They go, female body with a male head. Yeah, right. Try again, boys. No, I have female body with a female head. That ain't you. And it's wisdom that rules me, not you. And she is the spirit that created all things. I have hewn out my 7 pillars. I laid the foundations of this world. I did. Which again, takes us to Malachi, where she says, you married the daughter of a strange God. Yet is this spirit the spirit of your covenant, not the harlot. And she will be established in the end because she is the way that I rule. Now, let's go on to verse 14. I will ransom them from the power of Sheol. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your, what does it say? Plagues. Where, O Sheol, is your sting? Compassion is hidden from mine eyes. So let's go down and we'll just get a slightly different rendering just so we can see what others say. So we'll read the King James because this is the one that they build up. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be thy plagues. O grave, I will be thy destructions. Repentance shall be hid from mine eyes. So that's a little different, isn't it, in what it's saying? So we'll just grab on to NASB 1995. Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I redeem them from death? O death, where are your thorns? Oh, we get a picture of Israel, the rose, who was surrounded by the thorns. Is it hard to kick against those pricks? Not really. We looked at that. Oh, Sheol, where is your sting? What stung? Well, she got poisoned, number one, by a religious lie. She got stung on the foot, didn't she? Israel stumbled, right? She even went to sleep for a time in the religious lie so that she might bear the burden of the deliverance over time, right? So she was stung. She stumbled into the poison. She fell asleep for a time, but she does get up, we're told. Compassion will be hidden from my sight. No longer will she have compassion on these children who, she says, to whom shall I teach knowledge to? Those that are weaned from the breast. Well, apparently, because others have just, the adults don't want to reason. They don't want to hear reason. They have no understanding. And without the understand or the willingness to get the understanding, they will not have wisdom to know what they actually turned away from in the beginning. So in a sense, she has to cut the wicked away who have fell into the snare. And she said, if you make these idols, I promise you, you will fall into the snare and you will not be able to escape it. And but she promises her daughters, yet you I will call away. I will pull out from this lie because they struck you. And it was illegal for them to do that. And then they deceived you. They became thieves under the law of man, not under the law of God. God's law was to come off for daughters' tongues. That's right. And you denied that. And so they struck her, and we get them actually piercing her in Psalm 22 as the bulls of Bashan surrounding the doe of the dawn. They surround her and they basically pierce her, also like dogs. Which is a male harlot, another word for another figurative understanding of the dog in the Old Testament is a male harlot. So they wanted to make her a harlot because that's what they were, harlots. It says they were stallions neighing after their neighbors' wives, and they were. Which is why then we get this idea of multiple wives and man making himself superior under his own bloody law. That's all that is. It was never from God, ever. So when we look at this and we just take it at face value, this understanding, figurative understanding, then begins to open up. How we actually come out of the womb of Sheol. And it is to come away from the plagues, right? And yet she says in one passage, she says, it'll be my plagues. Where are your plagues? Oh, Sheol, where is your sting? So it was the King James version where she actually says it. I will redeem them. I will be thy plagues. So will she be the plagues? Or as in over here, where, O death, are your plagues? Because we understood what the plague was. What was the plague that broke in upon Israel? What was the plague that broke in upon Israel? Nobody wants to address this. We're not looking at Jesus being resurrected from the grave where he won't be corrupted. What does it say? It says father corruption. And father and son corruption. Let's get that straight. They only want to stick father in there. It's father and son corruption. And mother and daughter worm. We're going to look at that maybe quick too in another video again before we move on. Because worm takes us to dragon. I didn't know that. I was in a study. I should have known it. With the amount of information that comes up, I often wonder, I thought, well, now what is the meaning of worm there? What's a figurative understanding of a worm there? But I just never dug into it until about 2 weeks ago. I dug into it. So I think we're going to take a look at that briefly again. But by understanding the figurative of this, when we go to Psalm 106, it says, they made a calf in Horeb and adored a molten image. We also get women, and I believe it was the men that was doing this first and foremost. Then the women followed suit and began to feed their own goods unto it, because we're told under this religious line law, they do so turn the woman away from the truth. They do. So she, in a sense, she became beguiled by the first Adam. He did accuse her. So we do get a sense of a dividing here, of a division here, and we also get the sense of a murder. We get the sense that he murdered the righteous spirit over the land. His deception actually led to that, to the point where the women were just coming up to a point where they were willing to be deceived under the law of man that was going to put her in subjection to this religious lie and idol of a man, because they were using such horrible tactics against the woman from the beginning. So we see Baal firing his words straight from his heart, which were like drawn swords, off the covenant that never should have been called his bow there in Genesis. And he's firing at the branch of God that's coming over the wall, and that is daughters there. And it's the word hate appears there. They hate it. They hated her. They hated her. And they hated her without a cause. It was man's pride, Satan's pride, Adam's pride that led to the accusation of the woman, that over time that deception grew so large that he was able to steal her rights, steal her goods, steal her house, tear it down. All of those things comes around through the figurative we understand. So I will ransom them from the power of Sheol. Sheol is what? The womb of Sheol. This place here, where we die and go into the grave. So there's a double meaning of Sheol here. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, are your plagues? Where, O Sheol, is your sting? So the plague here, they made a calf in Horeb and adored a molten image. They exchanged their glory for the image of a grass-eating bullock. So what's a bullock god? Which is what the molten calf represents, that you can name today right off the tip of your mind. You don't even hardly got to think about it if you're in religion. Jesus. There's your bull god. An idolatrous image, which led to idolatry. That's right. And you can say, no, it's not the image in Daniel 2. That image has been built upon for thousands of years in man-made religion. And it has caused a harlot spirit to rule in the land. Now, we've proved that. So the plague we discovered that broke in upon them was idol worship of Baal. And another name for Baal in the beginning was this golden calf image, which turns over to Jesus, your bull god, your grass eating, which steals the glory of the wise women inside the nation of Israel, which is the scepter representation that Moses is told to make. And the men are told, if you look to this scepter, which is the wise women's law wrapped around that pole, you will live. If, however, you hearken to the law system of this harlot that's sent in by Baal, you get it? Baal and Balak, who was terrified of this nation, ruled by wise women, and they were growing in massive numbers, which ought to tell the men something there. They were doing something right. The women were ruling in the land. You see, and the numbers were growing hugely. They were not crashing. They were growing. And so here we have the plague. We absolutely know the plague because we studied this again. Phinehas, which was Aaron's son. When the men were told not to take these women into the camp, they were threatened not to bring these women from the surrounding Adamic nations into the camp. You know what they did? They went out and they were taking these women from the surrounding nations. And God threatened them in the beginning. You are not to do this. You do not take a woman from the surrounding nations. In the day that you do that, I'll cut you out of the numbering of the people. So we know that that's a fact. The men who took wives from surrounding nations outside the nation of Israel were cut away from the numbering of the Israelites. They were not considered Israelites. It was only through the women that was inside the nation of Israel that the men were rejecting. They did not want them in covenant because it was their law that ruled. The harlot that the men wanted to take in covenant said, well, hubby, you rule. You'll rule me. You can play God. And that appealed to the men. Oh, didn't it tickle their ears? It was like honey on their tongue. And God said to the men, in the day that you do that, you will die. And they do. We do. You see? And so the plague break in upon them. We know that the plague did so break in upon them. But Phinehas, Aaron's son, when one of the men brought in a Midianitish woman, which he wasn't supposed to do, he grabs up his spear, I think it was, and he strikes through the man, and then he strikes through the belly of the woman, which was showing you the covenant of the foreskin, which is with the harlot, represents a harlot representation, that was not to be the seed in the land, which is going to be Satan's seed, and another name for Satan is fallen Adam's seed, against the woman's seed, Israel, the daughters inside the nation of Israel. Now that's to be understood for anybody who has half a brain or a little bit of understanding of God's word. Those things are all backed up in the scriptures, which is part of the little book sealed up. So we know that the plague that you are saved from is the plague of idol worship of man as God, which is Baal. Beelzebub, bridegroom, Lord and Master, which is also the Antichrist that we find being built up in Daniel 2 by every successive kingdom. And there's no way you're going to get away from the fact that it's a male god built up, in this case a bull god straight out of the land of Egypt, called Jesus. Yeah, you're not going to get away from it. You're not. Not if you got a half a brain to reason with or a will to want to understand it. So I shall ransom them from the power of Sheol. I shall redeem them from death. And you're redeemed with the truth. And the truth is, God says you were to follow my law. And what did you do? You transgressed my law. You transgressed my covenant, which was to come from my daughter's tongue. That's what she states, not from man's, who wants to make woman his harlot after Baal and Balak sends in the harlot spirit to poison the men with this doctrine that just tickles their ears and drips like honey off of their tongue. Yeah. But in their hearts are drawn swords. There was pride and arrogance in the heart of man. And so we get the men actually chanting with the men who had come against the rose of Sharon, is what she's called, actually, Israel. And we get the men, her own men, standing off to the side saying, razz her to the ground, even down to the foundation thereof. They were doing nothing to protect and defend her covenant, nothing. So they were actually actively participating in their own death and too dumb to know it, just like they are today in many cases. Not all cases. But we know that in order to come and to be resurrected from the grave is to come away from idol worship and to follow the laws gave by the daughters of Zion inside the nation of Israel, which is your scepter in the way that God chose to rule. And we know that the God that is often spoken of is wisdom herself that created the kingdom. She's the creator. Yeah. Not Jesus' idol, Antichrist, who is actually another word for the Christ is the antinomian, and I'm writing in my Bible. And so antinomian, as we discovered, anti means against, and nomian means law. So the Antichrist, the anti-anointed one, the against anointed one, I guess I have to look at. Christos, Christ, isn't a man. It's a term, and it means to be anointed by the Spirit of God. And so this Antichrist, Jesus, yeah, he's the Antichrist. He's actually against the anointed one. And by being against the anointed one, he's against her law. And we know this to be true because it says, even as Jesus is head of the church, so too is man head of the woman. And all women must remain silence, which is silent in the churches. You're not allowed to speak. So it says the man law. None calleth for justice. Yeah, that's a verse. I forget where it is. We've spoke on that one too. Let me look it up. Hopefully my camera won't go down when I do this. So verse, none calleth for justice. And we don't. We as women don't call for justice because we believe the bull crappers' laws. And so we believe that their law is justice, right? And it says peace, peace when there is no peace. That's what they say to the daughters. Peace, peace when there is no peace. There's no peace under man's law. There is absolutely not an ounce of peace for a woman under man's law, and either for the men if they had half a brain. They rejected the gently flowing law of Sheol, she, the scepter, the one that was to rule, called your sovereign. It is not a man. So no one calls for justice. This is Isaiah 59:4. No one pleads a case with integrity. So I had hit on a word that had, forgive me for saying this, that I see my name in, whether it's there or not, which is nomia. My name's Naomi, so I see my name sort of there. And that's a Strong's Greek, and that's what I have eighth day dawning, to take up the conversation, to answer, to respond. So I can't help but see that we, as the daughters, are supposed to take up the conversation for the right, for the law, and our rights under the true law of God, which is not man-written law, which is what got dispensed from Mount Sinai, which means a desolation, which takes us to she will become a desolate spirit when she falls for his deceptions and agrees to his law system, which is a law system of blood, which is now why you have an idol and you're washed in blood. That's the simple facts of it. No one calls for justice. No one pleads a case with integrity. To plead with integrity means to understand the truth. And that's going to lead you to have some wisdom so that you can plead your case with integrity before God. They rely on empty arguments. They utter lies. What does it say in Isaiah 28? They have hid themselves under a refuge of lies. And with the womb of Sheol are we at agreement. She goes along with it. No more. They conceive trouble and they give birth to evil. So that again takes us to the passage, and we've looked at this on, I think, both channels. This is why I often will quote, the nun calls for justice. It's mostly the women in religion who is now got them wrapped up so tight under violence. It's ridiculous in most cases. I will never understand these women who goes, well, you know, we got freedom, blah, 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 blah. Have you looked at the world, girls? Do you know what goes on behind the scenes? Truly, to women in religions everywhere, including Christianity? Do you forget the beginnings of Christianity? You can pretend all you want, but human slavery, sex slavery, is at an all-time high. It's ridiculous. Can you not reason? What's going on? It's sinful. Your sense of reasoning is sinful. So now I can't remember where I was going. I got off on a tangent, sorry. So none calleth for justice. Oh. Yeah, see, I cannot remember where I was going. What I said. Anyway, when I watched the video, whatever I was going to say, maybe I'll post it underneath. So I will redeem them from death. You die when you choose to bow to an idol and not follow the ways of God. And God says, I'll write the truth on your heart. It's going to reason. And if you women go, well, it reasons that I'm lesser than him, that he's my head, and that I can't use my own brain to reason the truth out with, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. But we are supposed to present our case. According to that, we are supposed to take up an answer for us, for Mother's house, as the spirit that was to rule the land with the law of heaven, not man's ridiculous law system where most true crimes are swept under the rug. And God says in Malachi again, too, you are partial in your law, in your treatment of the law system. And you're partial to males, you're partial to the rich, and the list goes on. It does. It depends on the situation, who's going to receive the partiality. But we know 99% of rape cases, the woman's lying. Men don't want to get any. That's why you got hookers walking the streets. It's just a lie. Like, men don't want sex. You got women being degraded, debased, half naked. Every time a woman pulls up something, wants to do a little research, you got a friggin' image you got to look at of a half naked woman. But 99% of rape cases are lies. Men don't want it. No. I remember a man telling off the pulpit, saying that women had no right to say no to her husband in bed. You want to bet? You want to bet? This is my body. This is not yours. And you can teach that I'm nothing more than your rib. Think again. We were a whole nother entity unto ourselves with our own rights. And as the Creator's daughters, we reflected her image as creators in the earth. You are without excuse. I created it in the earth. And yet you say there's one tabernacle. No, there ain't. There's two. And you tore mine down, and you used a bloodshed law and a violent law to do that with. But you know what? That don't reason, because you have no understanding, and you will never gain wisdom to come out of the womb of Sheol. So, again, where's the plague? The plague that we come away from is the plague that broke in upon Israel, which was idol worship of Baal, husband, bridegroom, Lord, and master. We've established that. So, it's not Jesus. So the plague of earth, representing in many ways the womb of Sheol, is idol worship. It's idolatry, which leads to idolatry, which leads to a harlot spirit in the land. Harlot spirit in the land began as a representation of dogs. Dog means a male harlot. They were the one that were shoving it through violence. They were. And we see the first Adam accusing the first woman. And she said, I will wear it like a book upon my head. Right? The accuser did accuse her, and he wrote a whole book about it. But it's the little book that she uses to exonerate herself. So we have to take up an answering. We absolutely have to. They want to silence us. But Isaiah 42, the woman says, long time have I held my peace. I've held it long enough. Now will I go forth as a travailing woman, and I will destroy and devour your lies, Adam, against me. You lying sack of crap. Is it hard to kick against the pricks? What does it say? They took her, the lioness of God, Ariel, in their pit and silenced her voice on the hills of Israel. Just punch that in if you want to find the verse. I believe it's in Ezekiel 19. So that they would no longer have strong scepters for the rule. The strong scepters there were daughters that were born by many waters. So the Sheol we come out of is the womb, this current womb full of lies. So you're kind of like a stillborn in the womb is your understanding. The plague is idol worship of husband as bridegroom, Lord, and master. That was the plague that did so break in upon Israel. And then she says, oh, Sheol, where is your sting? Where's your poison? Where's your venom? I'll crush your head, Adam, serpent, Satan's seed. I'll crush your bloody head. Which is why you find Satan falling like lightning. off of the throne that belonged to her. Isaiah 52. Come away, daughter Zion, pick thyself up out of the dust of the earth, and take back your throne of power. Which is why it says, to this one is the covenant. And her covenant will be restored. Malachi 2. You dealt treacherously with the wife of your youth. And she also says there, Adam dealt treacherously, unfaithfully with me there. Which takes us back in multiple ways to the men in the Old Testament that were going against her, the righteous daughters. Which is why you come up with a divided land. They created two scepters. One, a harlot spirit that they wanted to rule through, and the righteous daughters whom they rejected. That's right. Yet more are the children of the desolate than of she who has a husband, who's handed all of her hosts. Lord of hosts means mother of hosts, mother of children, not father. Have we not all one, not father? No, we have all one mother, X. We got XY and XX. You know what that is? Mother, not father. So the appearance of that verse alone backs up again that idea of a virgin birth. It does. Because XX seems to have the implication that you do not have a father, in a sense. Have we not all one father? Well, the Y there would represent the father. The X represents the spirit and mother. So the XX, what's the implication of that? And I can't help but so I mean, you understand. I'm gonna make a comment here on what I saw on what was it, on Dune, and I don't usually watch it. I find that a boring series, boring show, boring movie. I did from the beginning, but now I'm starting to understand a lot of things about the Draco system and how it might actually operate and run. But they kind of give themselves away in one part without actually telling you the full story. But here we know death, the grave, and they said he has the key of hell, death, and grave. No, he doesn't. The key of David belongs to a daughter. It means to have power over the womb. That's what it means. That's what it's always going to mean. No man has power over the womb, though he wants to write it under his law that he can control her womb and all the children that comes out of it. No, the children belongs to the mother, always did, which is ridiculous. Why some only father knows the due date of the child. What a load of crap! Only the mother does. The father don't know the due date. The mother does, not the father. Are you kidding me? My gosh, she's the only one that's there for it if she wants to be. Yeah, let daddy guess in. Anyway, it don't make no sense. But in Dune, so, I mean, the point is, this is not Christ. This is not a man being resurrected out of the grave. This is us coming away from idol worship. And sting, the poison of the religious lie. They poisoned her with a religious lie. The sting of the serpent, the sting of the scorpion, the poison in the end. Which, when she takes back the truth, it's like poison to them. That they just can't bear it. They can't bear the truth. It just burns them. The fathers have, ate a sour grape. Oh my gosh. They can't stomach that, can they? It's called the truth. They can't stomach the truth. But in Dune, these, the Bene Gesserit, which is quite ridiculous. Bene is sons. I mean, sons of, I forget what it is. Gesserit. It should be the Bath. Bath means daughters. The daughters or the sisters, not sons. But it's telling, isn't it? It's telling you about the rulership, the harlot spirit, right? That backs this regime of kings, which was never supposed to be your ruler, your sovereigness. Anyway, I gotta go because my husband's home. So I'll pick that up or write it down underneath. So I'm gonna go now. Hope you all have a lovely day and is blessed with an abundance of truth. And thanks for watching.